is a little bit, as we've been liking to mix it up a little bit throughout this conference. This time we have a guest with us from Buzzfeed. Now, I'm not sure everybody knows about Buzzfeed. This is a news media outlet, and it's a little bit different. And so when we set this up, we thought about who could we invite that would be a little bit different here with a new hook. What Buzzfeed does so brilliantly that we like is that they engage people through a more social aspect of news reporting. It gets people in, but what they don't realize is they're actually getting legitimate, hard-hitting, really substantive news. It's like taking your medicine with some sugar on the side, right? And so we're finding that we get really engaged. Every time I go down a rabbit hole on the internet, I somehow find myself in a Buzzfeed article. So I don't know how that happens, but it works brilliantly. Along with that, we also have a very, very exceptional writer here in our midst, and this is Dan Vergano. I have read many of his articles. He started with Nat Geo, and I think before that you were with USA Today, right? As a senior science writer. And so he's been in the business of reporting on science for many, many years and doing a fine job of it. One of my favorite things that I've read is when he's reporting on aviation safety, and he had one article in particular. You should go and look for it. It's the top 6 reasons why flying is safe, or something. Did I get it right?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Maybe it was 7. I don't know.
Maybe it was 7. Okay, 6 or 7 reasons why flying is safe, or safer to fly than drive. So he has also taken a good look at risk in his reporting, and which makes him the perfect person to lead this panel. So I'm going to leave that to you, Dan. Have fun, and we look forward to hearing from everybody.
All right, I hope everybody's had their coffee. Everybody's ready to ask some questions of our panelists once they do their bit. We put a little bit of a burden on them because they're responding to what was presented before a little bit. And the goal in this panel is for them to present from their industry's viewpoint or their background's viewpoint a kind of look at your industry. I did want to say a little bit about myself. I was having Macondo flashbacks at the last panel. I was reporting for USA Today then. By the time you're talking to me, USA Today or Buzzfeed or something like that, things have usually gone pretty far wrong. I was really struck being taken back to those times to the question of safety culture within the regulatory agencies. Eventually a person like me, I am looking at those inspection reports. We do get a hold of them. And, what I often see is, the inspectors very good at noting, I think the previous panel person said, this guy doesn't have a hard hat. But those real reason questions, 7 questions back, why it went wrong, those you don't see on the reports. And so we're asking a lot of really dumb questions. Please put up with us. Trying to get back to that stuff. It would be great if there was a little bit of self-look, not just focused on the corporations of the firm, but within the regulatory agency itself. Like, what are we doing here? Where sometimes the inspection reports, frankly, end up seeing a little pro forma. They hit their things. They didn't do anything more than that. We're still grasping at answers when something really goes wrong. I won't defend the news media, though, to you. Our panelists today, Mike McKeon, who's with Deloitte. His background is the aerospace industry. He can talk to us a lot about the space shuttle main engines, which I'm going to point out to save him embarrassment, is the part that everybody worried about and worked great on the space shuttle. It's working so well that they're actually incorporating it into the next generation rocket at NASA, the SLS, I believe. So it's a wonderful rocket engine. Let's see, I got to get my mics, make sure I don't have Mike and Chris backwards. Mike Witt at Dow, he's going to be able to talk to us about identifying a risk and then taking it to your sort of lifetime responsibilities for safety. I think that's one way of putting it. Chris Munley, Chris Munley at Booz Allen. He is our token oil and gas guy. He can talk about the big picture risks and hopefully correct us when we go off wrong industry. And finally, Sonja Haber, who is going to be able to talk to us about sort of organizational psychology, organizational structures that lead to a safe culture, I think. So with that, I'm going to let them start talking. I warn you, we have not too many slides, but everybody's going to have a 5-minute sort of a quick 5-minute talk about what they see from their background and how it plays into what we're talking about today. So I'll start with Mike and sit down.
Okay. I guess I will stand, Sonja.
There you go.
I took my job relatively literal and serious to try to connect back to the last session, so I'm going to do my best to do that. The major overall theme that I'm going to go with, though, is really recognizing and responding to change. And you can talk about safety culture and how it fits and all of that, but it's really how the team recognizes and responds to change, at least for the comments I'm going to make. And some of the key points I took away from the previous panel were complacency leads to system failures. And I'll just read through these and then talk through them in an example in a minute. Complex systems include the people. A lot of times we consider complex systems just the machine, but it really is the people that operate the machine, design the machine, maintain the machine, and use the machine. So then culture driven by local leadership. That one's huge, very, very huge. And then people interfacing with people. I had a whole bunch of other ones, but those are the key ones I pulled out. And why those are important to me is I wanted to share with you an example of what I would call a very effective, very successful safety culture. And that was the culture that we had at the Kennedy Space Center during the Space Shuttle program, where the people at the Kennedy Space Center, what they were responsible for was the maintenance of the Space Shuttle main engines in between the flights. So when a shuttle would fly, it would land, and then our team would go in and do all the maintenance it's required to refly it. And so I worked at the Kennedy Space Center for almost 10 years, and I was there maybe 3 or 4 years as a systems engineer, and I was responsible for a major test on an engine. We had completed the maintenance, got it all done, it was ready to go to the pad. And I know David Kaplan knows that when you're talking about a space shuttle mission, we measure success in the day of processing, hour by hour success, because that's how tight the schedules are. If you miss an hour, you have a problem, and then over time that slips those schedules. So we're really, really keen on schedule. And we had an engine that had to get to the pad, and the very last thing we did is we put it in a bag, sealed the bag, pressurized the engine, and measured. We pressurized it with helium and measured to see if there was any leakage coming from the engine. They call that a mass spectrometer leak check. And we did the measurement, and it was right in the middle of the requirement, okay? That was my engine. I signed it off, ready to go to the pad. My boss, when I went back to my desk, said, "Hey, how'd the test go?" I said, "Great, right in the middle of the requirement." He said, "What was it last time?" I went back to look at it the last time, it was 0. I went back the previous time, it was 0, and the previous time before that, it was 0. So we could have sent it to the pad, but instead what we did was we took the bag off and went in with a probe, and we hit every single joint, every major line with it, and we found a crack in the fuel line. And if that had actually flown and that particular crack had failed completely, it would have blew up the space shuttle. But it didn't, because the way the people operated within that team and questioned the change and had to prove to themselves that the change wasn't something that was going to hurt us. And the last thing I'll say with it, because I know I have to get off, is the perspective that team had. If you asked anybody on our team what we did, when you first arrived there, you would say, "Oh, I maintain space shuttle engines. I help astronauts get to orbit." And our boss, what he would tell you and what I would tell you after being there not too long was our job was care and feeding of the rocket engines. Okay, that's what we did. And to do that, you actually have to see yourself as serving the rocket engine rather than the rocket engine serving you. And so you have to have people that worry every day about how that machine is functioning and whether or not it's going to do what it's supposed to do today. And that was really the basis for our culture. That's it.
Very good. Mike?
Great. Thank you, Dan, and thank you to my fellow panelists for giving me time to share.
Stand.
I think we
You don't
are.
have to stand.
I think Mike started a good trend. My name is Mike Witt. I'm a director of environment, health, and safety at the Dow Chemical Company, and I come to you from the lovely, warm state of Michigan. And I will promise you today, I will be the only person in the state of Michigan that is not still talking about that Michigan State football game over the weekend. However, I did notice the sharp-looking young man at table 11 who has a nice Spartan green on. You really caught my attention. Anyway. I'm here today a little bit of a fish out of water because I come from the chemical industry, and much of what was discussed in the previous session as it relates to safety, of course, very applicable in the chemical industry, but some of the questions around the regulatory aspects a little bit different than what we tend to manage on a day-to-day basis in the chemical industry. However, we are one of your biggest customers. We utilize on a barrels of oil equivalent basis, we utilize almost 1 million barrels of oil per day to feed our energy and feedstock needs in the Dow Chemical Company globally. And so we're a pretty big player in your world as a customer of your oil and gas businesses. We're also a very regulated entity. And in my role in environment, health, and safety at the Dow Chemical Company, I wear a number of hats. My primary hat is I lead our toxicology and environmental research organization. But I also play a role in our enterprise risk management organization that seeks to identify, evaluate, assess, and manage and mitigate risk as it relates to products that we sell and product solutions that we market around the globe. There's really one central, simple, I believe, process that we follow in order to manage risk appropriately at the Dow Chemical Company. I call it it's not a very interesting name. It's our enterprise risk management process, but it's the 4 steps that I think are interesting. Plan, do, check, and act. What does that mean? Plan, do, check, act. Plan. At a very high level, at the executive level in our company, on down to all the global business units, of which we have 17 right now, on down to the shop floor employees who are helping to put our product and product solution innovations to work. We ask ourselves questions on a daily basis. What looks right? What doesn't look right? How can this product be manufactured better? How can we procure materials from our suppliers more efficiently, more effectively, more safely? How can we move product from plant A to plant B? How do we move product from plant A to customer A or customer B? And then what do we know about the life cycle of this particular product? What do we think happens when the customer, however far downstream that customer may exist, what do we think happens? And those are the questions we need to ask if we want to fully understand and assess the risk management profile for products at the Dow Chemical Company. So plan, do, check, act. Plan, again, we ask those questions at a very, very high level. Do. We have 2 processes that we call the business risk review and the distribution risk review, where we ask ourselves, again, the questions up and down the value chain from where we secure or procure the materials all the way down to when we sell a material, we sell a product, we sell a solution to, say, a farmer, if we're talking about some of the molecules we sell through our agri-sciences unit, or Dow Microbial Control that actually sells materials as additives into the oil and gas industry, and many others. And so we ask ourselves those questions, and we come to we develop an assessment, and we come to an agreement that, okay, we've mitigated risk appropriately, and we can move forward. The act part, this is where we take our experts in the field, and we go out to all of our plant facilities. We go to our laboratories, one of which is the one that I currently lead. And we have individuals who are expert in the area of environment, health, and safety asking questions, much like a regulator or an inspector would. We are routinely inspected by Food and Drug Administration, the United States Department of Agriculture, the US EPA, because of the information that we produce in order to get a product to the market. And so we ask those questions internally because what I like to say to those that we're auditing is, wouldn't you rather have me ask the question than have someone from outside the company ask the question? So that's one driver. Of course, the other driver is to do the right thing. and to work as safely as we possibly can. And then the final step in the plan, do, check, act cycle is act. And that is anytime we do observe or identify a risk that we think needs to be managed at a higher level, we can elevate it through our system of governance. We have teams that are comprised of executives that focus on product. We have teams that are comprised of executives focused on supply chain or transportation, and then the operational aspect of our company. And then those, if they need further resolution, get elevated to the highest levels of the company through our sustainability team and ultimately our EH&S committee of the board. So with that, I just wanted to leave you with a thought as far as how we manage, how we identify, how we manage, and how we mitigate risk within the Dow Chemical Company. I believe, in fact, I know that some of it is applicable based on what I heard in some of the discussions earlier today, but I look forward to hearing from the other panelists, but also hearing your questions and helping all of us to learn together. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Chris can stand up, too.
Good morning. I'm Chris Munley. I'm with Booz Allen Hamilton. Couple of slides. Press the button. Share with you a little quick story about a personal, I guess covering personal risk. My wife and I just recently made a decision, and it was a long thought, to become foster parents. Where I live, the situation is a little bit dire. There's about 600 children that are without homes and places to go, and only 60 certified families to actually take these children in. Going through that process made us essentially forensic accountants on ourselves. But one of the glaring things I didn't realize at the time, we have 3 children of our own. The requirements to be a foster parent has all kinds of interesting things. You got to have a fire escape plan. Well, honey, why didn't we have a fire escape plan to get our own kids out of the house? Right? It's like, seriously? I mean, that's how in the face this is. Now, I'm a bit of a fish out of oil today with you guys. I spend most of my time in the oil patch, but wanted to share with you a couple of insights from my travels in and out of that oil patch, and some of the things that we've done and some of the things that we've seen with respect to operators. I think you as regulators have a couple awesome opportunities in front of you to take advantage of a few things related to the change that's happening in the industry. Left side, key trends that we see, the crew change is underway. There's a massive exodus of the best experts in all phases of the oil and gas business, from the drillers to the engineers to the scientists. They're hitting the peak of their retirement. Their pensions are worth a gazillion dollars, and they're done. They've put in their 35 years. That expertise is flowing out the door each and every day. To me, I think that knowledge, these people's ability to assess situations. I heard the term used, consciously competent. That comes with 35 years of being a veteran and making decisions when things don't go as planned and scripted. That knowledge, that expertise is at risk for going away. The new crew coming in will not have that opportunity to retain or be exposed to that body of knowledge by that group of workers. Some of the things that we talk about often is, especially with operators, is what are you doing to identify your experts and your experts at all categories of the human capital inside of your organization, and then try and find the places where the rookies need to be partnered with the veterans to transfer that knowledge. There was a lot of discussion earlier around what is instinct, what is knowledge, what is the best way to react in a situation. The other things that are sort of the trends in the business that we're seeing, the speed at which technology and innovation are arriving in this business is amazing. A lot of that is due to the fact that you have these things called unconventional plays. We're doing things out of the way, we're doing them different than the way we used to do them. That is a situation where companies are starting to leverage automation. And automation is going to bring about the segmentation or the addition of complexity in the business. Projects are increasing in complexity. The operational complexity as well is going through the roof. And then third, the industrial internet is here. You can go down to your hardware store and probably buy a lawnmower that's going to connect to the daggone internet. And you can check it while you're at work, see if it's mowing your lawn or somebody else's. My dog will probably connect to the internet. The point to be made here is that the game is changing. There are third-party people who interface with technology that do not work for the operators, and they do not work for the companies associated with those operators that seek to do harm. That industrial internet is an attack surface. It's an expansion of the ways by which third parties that wish to see the world burn will come after the operators. I think there was a headline I read yesterday where the FBI agent interviewed, special agent was talking about two things. He said the Islamic jihadi terrorist that made a comment online that said that our intent is to try and bring down the U.S. energy grid. Well, that's a hard thing to do. But he said that their technical capability is very limited, but their intent is very high. That motivation is not going to go away. As regulators, that's something to consider with respect to the health and safety. We view cyber security and mitigating cyber risk inherent part of the safety program. Thanks.
Thank you. And Sonja.
Okay, good morning. Sonja Haber. I'm really happy to be here, and I've been hearing a lot of very good things, and I've been hearing this term safety culture. And I want to try to leave you with a little change of perspective on what we mean by safety culture. If I can do anything, and I can do that one thing, then I will have succeeded. Because there's a lot of questions I have and a lot of things I want to tell you, but I just want you to walk away and think about one thing, because we have too many other things to think about. I've spent more years than I care to tell you about in this area. I've worked through many different organizations. I've done a lot of cultural assessments all over the world. And I think it's time for us to really consider, are we talking safety culture, or are we talking about the culture for safety? Edgar Schein, who many of you may know, is a leader in organizational culture theory. And he defines culture as the shared basic assumptions that are taken for granted and determine the members' daily behavior in an organization. Okay? Let's think about that. I want you to really understand what that means. What's a basic assumption? So picture your own organization. And let's say that you are in your organization and the organization has a basic assumption, meaning a shared value, a belief, or an attitude that people in the organization are basically lazy. They're not motivated. They're not engaged in their work. So you go out into your organization and you see somebody sitting at their desk and they're staring out the window. Your basic assumption says this person is daydreaming. They're not involved with their work. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because that's what you think about the values in the organization. Now picture yourself thinking about the basic assumption that people in this organization are engaged, they're motivated, they're creative, they're initiative. You walk out and you look at the same person sitting at that desk, staring out the window. What do you think now? You think they're trying to come up with a solution to a problem. They're thinking about a new opportunity. They're thinking about their work and how they can help this organization move forward. You made the same observation, right? Same person sitting at the desk, looking out the window. But the conclusions you came to were different because you had a different basic assumption. It is so predominant in our thinking, we take it for granted. And yet we can't, because really when we're talking about safety culture, we're not talking about safety culture. Edgar Schein now says there is no such thing as safety culture. There is a culture for safety because you have values and shared understandings and basic assumptions in your organization that promote behaviors that result in safe performance. Now, that same foundation, that same culture, the same basic assumptions and values drive your security performance. They drive your quality performance. They drive your financial performance. That culture doesn't change. Those basic values and shared assumptions are there. So what we've done in this world now is we've put on glasses and we're looking at them through a safety window, a safety framework, and we're talking safety culture. And what we're really talking about is measuring safety performance. And the outcomes that we observe are really that performance. They are not necessarily the underlying basic assumptions or shared values. And why is that important? Because when we go to make culture change or make improvements in our organizations, what are we treating? We're treating those observables, those behaviors, those safety performance elements. But we're not necessarily understanding or changing the basic assumptions. So we can see a short-term improvement in behavior. We can improve the amount of slips, trips, and falls so that we can reduce that. But have we changed the value of what people think about safety or the basic assumptions of what they think the organization really values? No. And so eventually it goes back down again, or we have a decrease in performance because we haven't changed that underlying assumption. It's really important because we spend a lot of time measuring safety culture, and we're measuring really performance outcome when we need to understand what is the underlying assumption that's driving performance. So I have a lot more slides, but I've run out of time, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that in the dialogue.
All right, well, maybe I should give you a little more time, but by asking a question. There was in the earlier panel, there was a back and forth one question about psychological assessment of the workforce. And the question came from the audience. There's tools out there for doing this, and the answer I thought I heard up here was like, tough to get past our bosses, tough to get that implemented. You know, and please the other panelists as well. I mean, how do you psychologically test a workforce for safety? And is that too optimistic? Is that a 20th century idea? What do you say, Sonja? Is that a reasonable thing to lead off from your tone?
You know, we talk about safety culture assessments, but really I think we need to look at cultural assessments. And to do that, there are reliable and validated tools. But you need a diversity of expertise to look at it. You need people in behavioral science that can understand the results and the information that you get when you do those assessments, as well as people from the technical industry that you're looking at, so that you can make sense of that information. But there are ways to do it, at reliable ways. I've been doing it for over 30 years. So my background is in behavioral science. So I think that it's important to try to understand those elements, because then we can understand performance in the organization.
And that's simple and cheap to do, I assume. So.
Not simple, and cheap is a relatively interesting term. Well, let's think of it as a return on investment, right? Because if we understand that assumption and it helps us increase our safety performance, then it's priceless.
Very good. And yes?
Yeah, I know, I mean, it's not a highly scientific evaluation or predetermination, but when I bring somebody in to interview for a job at Dow, I share with them a little bit about our culture of safety, and that we believe and that we only look for those who we think can fit very well into the culture of safety. I will share with him or her our history, where we've come from 20 years ago. We were just somewhere between 1.6 and 1.8 injuries per 200,000 hours worked, and now we're down to about 0.15, 0.18, depending on the quarter. And so we've made a, I think, remarkable improvement in our, and this is just focused on injuries and illnesses in the workplace, is that metric. And I share that with them because what I would like to do is get a sense for how they can embrace that if they view it as something that's important. And based on their either verbal reaction or body language, you do get a sense of, yeah, they think this is important, or they may not think it's important. Not that it's going to drive the ultimate decision as to who gets the job, but it does give you a sense as a leader or as the potential leader of this new employee, their commitment to what I like, as Sonja put it, the culture of safety.
I do want to point out that the assessment type of work that I'm talking about is more on an organizational level, not an individual level.
Sure.
But yeah.
Sure.
And I want to ask the panelists right off the bat as well, were there things in the earlier panel that struck you that either resonated strongly, this is what we hear a lot, or that, boy, this isn't how we do it? I was thinking in particular where what Mike was describing was control over, it sounded like the production chain from beginning to end, which sounds very different than the situation a lot of you guys are facing, where different subcontractor situations, things like that might be a different thing. If you guys had reactions to the previous panel that, points you think are worth making, the differences or strong points to make. Obviously, what we're hearing a lot is this, it comes down to people often, and too much focus on technology is a mistake. It's the interface between people and technology. I think that's what we heard a lot of. I don't know if the panelists have a reaction to the previous panel. Anyone want to jump in?
I think something that occurred to me is that we really need to have a more systemic approach to safety, meaning that we need to really look at the technological, the human, and also the organizational. And the complexities around that are really incredible. And I didn't get to talk about it, but the Fukushima nuclear accident is a classic case. And there is an excellent report that came out from the International Atomic Energy Agency now. And in volume 2 of that report is a section on human and organizational factors. I had the privilege to work with a group of international experts on that for almost 2 years. And I think the point is that we're all responsible. I heard in the previous session about regulating safety culture, not regulating safety culture. You don't regulate culture, right? You regulate the performance or the outcome of that. And it is, and I asked this question, I think, yesterday, it is when you look at a systemic approach to safety, then you're looking at the culture of the regulator, the operator, the government, the public, all of that, to understand what the value of safety is and what may have contributed to an accident. I want to give you just a quick piece from the Fukushima accident, which is that the culture was such that TEPCO, the operator, actually at one point did want to conduct an emergency preparedness exercise. This is prior to March 2011. The government, basically the regulator, said, no, you can't do that. And the reason being that the perception was that the culture in the public would be such that if you conduct an emergency exercise, they're going to think your technology is not safe. Okay? So think about that from a cultural perspective. The different values and the lack of a shared understanding of what it meant to be safe from the regulator, from the operator, and from the public.
And the other thing I of course want to pluck from y'all is there an approach from your background that you think wasn't discussed here, you would have liked to have heard discussed at the earlier panel? I think you had points about the amount of data you can take, the handling of big data, and how that can be a productive thing for regulators.
Yeah, one of the things that listening to the previous panel, we're talking about the nexus of people and technology. And we had very little conversation, I thought, about the data part. And for me, the data is at the heart of that nexus. And it can be big data, or it can be relatively small data, depending on what you're doing. But once you've implemented a system, once you've designed it to the requirements, once you've validated that it operates to the requirements you designed it to, as soon as you turn it on with a group of people, the design requirements don't necessarily matter. What matters is how it operates over time and what that complete system looks like. And unless you're collecting the right kind of data so that you can look back and say, this is how this machine has functioned successfully, you're not able to deal with the change when it occurs. So you don't know if a change is bad or benign or maybe even a good thing. So if you look at the data that we had in the Space Shuttle Main Engine program, over the life of the program we had slightly over 1 million seconds of operation time of that engine. The oil industry collects a year's worth of shuttle data in 23 days. And that's notwithstanding the number of sensors and all of that kind of stuff. But literally, you have the opportunity to collect that data in 23 days. And it's a continuous operating machine, so You know, one of the things that could be helpful to think about, and I'm not sure if you regulate this or not, is our machine in the space shuttle, the engine, you know, it flew, let's call it 10 times a year, which is a lot. And with that, we collected a certain amount of data and we had a whole bunch of tests. But we had a group of people that their whole job was data. Their whole job was to look at data every day. And if we weren't collecting the kind of data that they thought we needed to, they come and say we need to go get this other kind of data. So using the data to help guide your decision making and help guide your culture in terms of how you respond to things, to me is an extremely critical part of the equation. And without that focus, to me it's difficult to, you know, get where you want to be from an organizational standpoint.
Huge opportunity. We just recently completed a scientific study on HSE data for looking 10 years in the past at a select set of sites that did include chemical facilities as well. And you want to find a blind spot. We call this removing the hay. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of data, and that creates hay. Your goal is to find the needles. We like to, the cost of compute has fallen so far, and the tools that are now accessible to corporations to sift through, find right algorithms, and make that a process that you can routinely do to find those blind spots, and then decompose. In the research project I mentioned, we were looking to find a way in which the particular operator could get predictive, find indicators that lead to, or factors that lead to a situation where you will end up or result in a low occurrence, high impact type scenario. And then also decompose those types of scenarios that have come to pass in detail, and then try and operationalize that through the exercise mechanism. Exercise